Okay. Assalamualaikum and good evening, everyone. Apa khabar semua?
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi
I hope
Baik, baik.
everyone is safe and fine, especially from the current pandemic of COVID-19. So thank you so much for joining this webinar. Despite, especially for those in Indonesia who do not know, today is a public holiday in some states. It's Hari Pusam, so we can't. They it cannot be a lecture, but due to we planned long time ago, and I have to do it today. And thank you very much, everyone from UIM students and also from University of what's your university name?
Sebelas Maret. It's
Sebelas
like
Maret for joining.
March 11.
Yep,
Yeah,
Sebelas Maret. But
right.
what does it mean by Maret?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but if I'm not mistaken, the decision to develop this university was at 11 March.
All right. Okay. All right.
Right.
Thank you, everyone, for joining this session. This webinar is organized by the AP 771, Masters of Urban Development and Management, University Teknologi Mara, and also University of Sebelas Maret, Indonesia. Okay. It is a continuation of apa nama, back then I taught quantitative methods and analysis. Okay, I talked a lot about calculations, equations on methods and analysis for population projection for my class, for research methodology class. This time I invited my friend Dr. Chrisna Permana, yes,
That's right.
to
That's
give
right. It's
to
not changed my
share his
name.
study. Should I call you the Chris or Krishna?
Just Chris. That's fine. Just a normal day.
Okay, the normal event, Dr. Chris to share his experience, knowledge, and thought about the qualitative methods and analysis. Okay, and he was my friend back then in Liverpool. We did PhD together. Although we are in the same, although we are in different department. I'm in geography, and he's from planning, but it's within the same building. So alhamdulillah, again, we finished together
Yeah.
in the same year, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
now
Yeah.
we meet again to collaborate the
Yeah.
all the knowledge and experience. Okay,
Yeah.
a little bit background about Dr. Chris, especially for UIM students. Hold on, I need to admit the students who come in, or all participants, because I'm the creator of this link. Okay,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? So Dr. Chris is a lecturer in Department of Urban and Regional Planning, Universitas Sebelas Maret. Okay, he's also a associate researcher, Department of Geography and Planning, University of Liverpool, and he's also a postdoctoral fellow in School of Architecture Planning and Policy Development, SAPPK, SAPPK, Bandung Institute of Technology (ITB), and School of Environmental Science. This one is university in Indonesia. And he earned his PhD in town planning in Liverpool. Okay. And he completed research project with Lincoln Institute of Land Policy, New York University, Universitat van Amsterdam, UN Habitat, and Japan International Cooperation Agency, where some of the outputs have been published in journal and conference paper. That's what sangat kagum lah. Is because we are the same batch, and then you excel very quickly, very good, very proud.
No, no, no,
He's
no.
currently a visiting scholar. Okay, this one already mentioned. His research interests include collaborative planning, transport, community governance, institution, and urban networks. So, I think without further ado, I think many of my students already joined this session, and also yours as well. So, without further ado, I welcome Dr. Chris Permana to give a talk about qualitative methods analysis based on PhD research. Am I right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Please
Thank you.
welcome Dr. Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Hakim, and it's my pleasure to be here to be invited by University of Teknologi Mara, if I'm not mistaken. The name is like that, right? And Yeah, glad to meet you all, students from Malaysia and also some students from Indonesia, if I'm not mistaken, and also yeah, perhaps lecturers from the two universities. Hopefully, these kinds of collaborations can be strengthened in the future, so we can have another sessions or perhaps research in the future together. Well, is that is that okay with my voice before I start my presentations? If it is okay, then I can just share my screen. Although
Yes,
I'm learning how
loud
to
and
do
clear.
it. Let me check. Okay, tab. Right. I'll do it like this first, and then let me know, Kim, if the the face up, how can I say, like the wallpaper, the display is
Slide.
still not working. Is that all right now? Okay.
Yeah, I can see the slides presentation. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, as already mentioned by Dr. Hakim, that today I was invited to join this class to discuss with you all. I think I'm not the one who deliver the topic, but I hope that both of us can do learning together. Like I will learn from you, while at the same time I also share some thoughts and share some knowledge based on my experience doing these kinds of qualitative methods during my PhD. So uh, the hint is I'm not the master of qualitative methods. So at this time I share my experience based on my PhD, and I'm still learning as well, as the same as yours, doing these kinds of research method. This research method is kinds of tricky because you learn it, you do it, but then if you leave it for some periods and then you have to face it again, then sometimes you forget about it. So the point is you have to go back and check and read and keep in your mind the basic process and the main stages of doing these kinds of research. So in this class, I would uh, emphasize 5 points. The first point, I will give you the research design in the philosophical aspect. So perhaps this is a place where I can give you the fundamental understandings about research design. Of course, I know that perhaps Dr. Hakim and his co-lecturers already introduced this research design in the earlier session, but I will just give some parts of it in order to keep you updated, especially to be connected to the whole stories in these PowerPoint presentations. And then after the philosophies of research design, I'm going to explain about definitions and key concept of qualitative methods. What is qualitative methods? Types of qualitative methods, and then today the learning focus is on case study method, which is one of the types of qualitative methods. And then in order to deeply discuss about case study method, I'm going to use my case study in PhD research as an example for explaining how the case study can be conducted. As I already mentioned earlier, that perhaps this PhD thesis is not as good as many PhD theses. It's just a normal one, but perhaps you can use it as a lesson learned, and you might develop a better case study method. So yeah, in terms of philosophical understanding, the research design consists of 6 questions. So basically, if you want to develop a research, you, you need to start thinking about the questions in your mind, the questions around what kinds of phenomenon you want to deal with, you want to answer, what kinds of questions that you have, and then perhaps relevant for you to answer with academic ways. So there are so many alternatives of questions, like for example, why the rain drops to the ground. Perhaps for some people it is not important to be conducted by academic approach, but maybe for some other academic working or doing or studying in environmental science or maybe natural science, they will think that these kinds of questions is important. So basically the research questions is uh, subjective, subjective, and then also contextual. So the point is you need to think carefully why and what is the phenomenon that you want to know, and then the second question, what is the justifications for this question? Is that important for your research area? Does it have contributions if you answer the question for your research community? Is that relevant, or perhaps it's just like a business as usual? So if you are doing research and you come to I don't know how to say it in English, but we have like a research proposal period where students are invited to a sort of like examination room, and then he has to present his research proposal in front of 3 or 4 examiners and 2 research supervisors. So the first question that usually research supervisors or examiner ask is about the justifications of your research questions. Many of them will ask about, is that important? Why important for you? And to what extent these kinds of research questions are relevant for our subject, for example. So you have to be prepared with these kinds of questions. So this is basic understanding before you really think that your research can be developed into a research design. So after you put the emphasis on the fundamental aspect in terms of justifications on how important your research questions, then you start to think about the logic of the approach that you will use in order to complete this research. I mean, what kinds of logic will relate to the way you do from the beginning to the end of your research. You should have in your mind that your research will go to, for example, certain answers in terms of like maybe policy response, maybe recommendations about decision-making process, perhaps argumentations or critics to a specific land use planning approach. So you should know what is the finding and the output of your research. And then you should know that there is a process to achieve that findings. It is a sequence, it is a logic. So I keep telling my students that in order to develop a good research design, you have to follow this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have to follow 6 questions and keep asking in their mind, like in front of their laptop, like what kinds of the research questions, what justifications for these questions, is that strong enough, is that relevant enough, is that important enough to be asked, and also the logic behind the process. And then also not to forget about what kinds of methods you want to choose to complete this research question, and then how to analyze, and finally, in order to make sure that your research is safe and good for your community, you have to think about the ethical implications. If I'm not mistaken, we were together, Hakim, Dr. Hakim, when we were in Liverpool, and we were reminded by our professor, because we didn't really care. I mean, not you, but me myself wasn't really care about ethics at that time. I mean, I didn't really follow the stage of doing research with ethical instruments. So at that time, my supervisor reminded me about looking at the procedure of doing research, especially because the research may have impact to your community, and this is an important thing that you need to think, to be put into account. Let's say, for example, if you research about animal cloning, and then if you do the research and quite successful in proof that animal can be cloned, there will be a wide implications to the people and to the animal themselves. For example, perhaps animal may think about, I will not do merit because I think without merit I can do cloning. So there won't be any cat approaching another cat because of this kinds of cloning thing. So this is an implications in terms of the changing of culture of people because of your research. So be careful about doing research, and be committed to follow the requirements provided by your university or institution in terms of doing research. So basically, what is research design? There are five good statements from five prominent scholars. Yin, I think I would suggest you all to take a look at his book, his or her, I'm not sure, but you have to take a look on his book, Yin, case study. She mentioned about the research design is a getting from here to there, which means you are here, you are asking a questions, and then you have to think about what kinds of process in order to go there. There means when you already have the answer of your question. So this is a short statement, but clearly explaining everything about what is research design. And then the second one is how the research will be conducted. Yeah, it's normative, easy. And then contain professional decisions and steps of action. So it's like a standard and procedure of doing things. Without research design, we could only do research randomly. Especially for this qualitative research, you have to be careful. Many people think qualitative research is easy in a way that perhaps it is understandable. You can follow your mind. It can be easily structured by your mind. But sometimes, if you don't have a proper knowledge, and if you don't follow the proper professional decisions and steps of actions, you might lose at some point. You will be overwhelmed in explaining a few parts, but then you miss so many parts, and this kinds of process is quite challenging. So it is quite different with quantitative research, because quantitative is more exact, pasti. Yes, if you have 3 and 4, and then you multiply them and it becomes 7, it is pasti. And if you have like a spatial analysis, you put a map there, the existing conditions and the future conditions, you overlay and you find the answer. It is pasti, exact. But with qualitative research, you may deal with a lot of dynamics, a lot of subjectivities. So that is why I mentioned that research design is very important for you to guide your qualitative research. And then it says that a qualitative research, I mean, a research design needs data generations, choice of structured and unstructured viewings, and selections of methods. And then also the process of rational, logic, and systematic process of solving a question. So these are the five that you need to keep in your mind before you do and develop a research design, especially for qualitative research purposes. So what is qualitative methods? I think many of you already familiar and already know about qualitative methods. Quantitative, which is countable, and you can easily define how the numbers. But qualitative is a sort of abstract and uncountable, which means like I can easily count how many students here. This one is a quantitative approach. But if I want to know whether, for example, Nurul or Almadia or for example, Dr. Hakim opinion about my background here, maybe. They good is it good enough or not? I'm not sure, and I need to deal with a qualitative approach instead of quantitative approach. I don't say that quantitative approach might not work. It can be worked, but it is better when you use qualitative approach. Why? Because qualitative approach might cover a lot of informations, a lot of knowledge beyond accountable aspect can be covered. Then yeah, it is originally born under the social and behavioral science. So basically, qualitative method was introduced when scholars began to discuss about social interactions of people. They started to discuss about behavior of people, and they were aware that quantitative method might not be relevant to deal with these kinds of assessment. I mean, these kinds of phenomena. So then they start.
Um, Dr. Chris is disconnected. Um, Chris, are you there? Dr. Chris? Hold on. Um, okay, all right. So Dr. Chris is disconnected. He will join in shortly. Okay. Hi, Chris. Um,
I'm sorry.
all right.
Yeah, as you might already know that there is sometimes a problem with internet connection. I suddenly lost my connection. Really sorry about that. Let me continue. So basically, the qualitative. Is my voice okay, Dr. Hakim?
Yes. Nice.
Okay, okay, right, okay. So basically, all these six statements represent the most important answer or the most important explanations about what is qualitative method. You deal with the process, relationship, mechanisms, and real-life investigations, which involve human perceptions, opinion, values, and interpretations, which are very subjective and difficult to be measured by quantitative approach. So if you already understand about this basic understanding, then we can just go through. So what is the difference between qualitative and quantitative? In quantitative research, hypotheses and research questions are often guided by theories. So the researcher can be strictly follow the theories and then prove it, whether it is right or wrong. But in qualitative research, theory is used in so many parts of the research. It can be used for developing the argumentations at the beginning of your research. It can be used to describe the variables that you want to use in order to, to develop an analytical framework to guide your research, and also as a part of your guidance to analyze the data and information you collected from data collection stages. And then in terms of key concept, we basically have five stages of developing a qualitative method. sorry, the arrows should be in the opposite in terms of explaining the inductive logic of qualitative research. This one is more, this one on the picture shows the arrow shows that generalization came from researchers and the way they look for broad patterns, generalizations, or theories from the teams. So basically, at the beginning of your qualitative method, you have to gather informations first. Let's say you do the interview, you do the observations, and then you do the documentary review, and then you collect all the informations, and then you start to ask open questions to the participants, and then get their opinions, and then try to mix all the informations, and then all the information collected will be used as as an input for your analysis. Then after you do the analysis, you start to have a broad pattern, and then you have to reshape it into important findings for your research. And once the findings are obtained, then you can start to go back to the theory and then compare it. If you find a similar pattern, then you can say that the findings are similar to the pattern. And you might extend at some point there is additional information, or there's additional argumentations to improve or to extend the generalization the theory, the previous theory used in this research. So basically, by using qualitative method, you can extend the essence of theory. It's not only to confirm or not only to criticize, but also to extend the theory with supplementary informations and justifications. So there are three places where you can use theory in the qualitative method, which is the theory in the opening or the background of your theoretical underpinning and hypothesis building, and then theory at the methodological stage when you are trying to develop your method, where you want to pick whether you use the data collections with questionnaire or open-end questions. So basically, these kinds of methods should follow the theory. And finally, at the end of your study, you will also need to use theory as a guidance for you to describe the process of organizing the information of your research. I have a student, and this student did a sort of a qualitative research, and she was confused because she got a lot of important information. She got a lot of necessary data, but then the problem is how did she manage this data? There were so many. She did follow the process of doing a qualitative method, but she forgot to put a framework in order to guide the process of analyzing the data. So then I asked her to go back to the theory and develop an analytical framework. So then the analytical framework will guide her to how can I say, like, to manage and to classify the findings, so then the story can be achieved in order to answer the questions. Well, the qualitative method consists of 5 types. The first one is in-depth interview, which is normal. It is a personal interview. You have a bunch of questions. It's quite deep questions. You will ask about their the person's opinion, perspective, informations, or perhaps argument about the subject matter. For example, if you think about the problem of COVID-19 and its impact on, let's say, the change of people's habit in commuting, then you can ask in-depth interview in terms of gaining information about their happiness of using, for example, changing from public transport to motorcycle, for example. Then these kinds of questions is deep and important for you to gain personal opinion about the subject matter. And what happens if you want to ask a question to a group of people which represent specific, perhaps institutions or identity? Then you don't need to do it in-depth interview. You can just go to the focus group, with a focus group consisting of, for example, 6 to 10 people It's not the basic requirement. You can be more with 12, let's say, or 15, but between 6 and 10 would be the most effective number where you can get deeper and robust discussions with focus group discussion. So here in the focus group, you invite the students, not students, sorry, respondents, and then you answer and you discuss about the things, and then you start to cross-asking between them in order to get the general comments, opinions, informations, and argumentations. The ethnography, the third one, is the in-depth observations. For example, if I want to do the ethnography, I can just go to a place, let's say the same questions about the opinion of people in terms of the impact of COVID-19 to the changing habit of commuter in the transit station, for example. Then rather than asking all the commuters in the stations, I will just go to the station every day, and then I observe a number of passengers, I mean not passengers, numbers of commuters without asking them, and I put their changing habit in a notes. I take a picture, I take a video, and then later on I organize all the informations and make a justifications about the change of their habit. So this kinds of method is a bit different and quite challenging, but also very complete in terms of obtaining information. And the fourth one, which is the one that I will discuss in deeper element, which is a case study. It is a process of representing, generalizing, and diversing a phenomenon that we want to discuss. Using a case or using a multiple cases that you can explain about the phenomenon. Like for example, let's say the impact of COVID-19 to the change of people habit in commuting. Rather than take a look at all cities in Malaysia, you can just take one case study, which is Kuala Lumpur, for example. Then you can be focused on Kuala Lumpur and dig more informations about the impact of COVID-19 to the transit stations only in Kuala Lumpur area. Then the findings can be used to generalize the general patterns of the impact. So basically that is a case study. And the observations is just a process of gather systematic informations, just to cross-checking, just to how can I say, like to get the feeling in deeper. Quite similar to ethnography, but observation has a more flexibility in terms of how can I say, like your personal engagement to the subject matter. So yeah, now we are focusing on case study. It is a learning technique in which a student is faced a particular problem, which is the case. So like that one I mentioned earlier, that we are taking an example of the impact of COVID-19 to the change of people habit in using public transport in transit station. So the case is about the impact of COVID-19 on the transit station. So we need to pick one case, that one I mentioned in Kuala Lumpur. And then the case study facilitates the explorations of the real issues with the defined context. So the case itself will represent the whole stories of many other cases around Kuala Lumpur. And then, yeah, and all many informations about it, which basically emphasize the process of generalizing or diversing the subject that we are going to research in your topic. So what should be what should represent a component of a case study? For example, you should have the knowledge of doing case study, and there should be a researcher. Of course, you are the one who do the research, and then there should be a circumstances. There should be a story behind the decisions of using case study, and there should be a case itself. There is a funny when you decide to use the case study, but you don't know where is the case. What is the good case for you to do the research? So you need to identify a bunch of cases which perhaps represent the most relevant cases for your research. And finally, you shrink it into two or one case or four cases. It depends on your requirements. And then you can just jump into the research in order to make a detailed assessments on these selected cases. They should also have data. They should also have criteria to select the case. And in order to support the case, as already mentioned or illustrated by Scholz and Olaf, there should be an open-ended interviews. There should be a focused interviews, structured interviews, survey experiments. All these approaches are important approaches to develop the case study and to support the case with proper information and data. So now we are jumping into the case of my thesis, the one that Dr. Hakim mentioned. I'm going to share the information about how did I use case study in order to deal with my research. At that time, my research was about community initiatives and the reshaping of collaborative planning practice in Indonesia, and the case of Creative Kampung. Uh, Creative Kampung is a sort of like urban kampung maybe you have in Johor or in Kuala Lumpur, where the government or maybe the local stakeholder decided to select or to pick one theme, like for example maybe handicraft or maybe clothing or music as a core community to support local economic development. So um, normally they introduce Creative Kampung as a part of revitalizations. You might not really find it in Kuala Lumpur, but maybe in Johor or maybe in not the peninsula, the opposite of the peninsula. I forget the name. There's still a lot of maybe slum areas like in Jakarta or in Yogyakarta. Then Creative Kampung is as a means of transforming these poor areas into more attractive and more livable areas. So the thesis talk about how the community initiative emerge and make influence to reshape planning practice in Indonesia that was previously conducted in more top-down into a new approach that emphasized the practice of bottom-up. So this the argumentations or the hypothesis was that community initiative that emerged in the early 2000 after the national reform contribute significantly to transform the process of planning in Indonesia, especially at the neighborhood level. So in order to develop a case study, I follow the 9 stages of providing the introductions. I develop the key issues and develop the research questions. And then I identify my research role. I mean, what should be expected from my performance, like whether I need to give the opinion or just let people to make opinion, and I organize data. And then also I develop the survey design, data collection procedure, and then analysis, verifications, triangulations, and then once the triangulation process complete, then you can just start write it down into your thesis. So this is more about the story of the thesis, but you no need to care a lot about the story, but try to grasp the way how can we put context into an introduction. This is important. If you remember, in the early stage I said about the justifications of the importances of your research. Then the introduction will provide a strong explanations about why your research is important. So I emphasize that at that time when I did my research, the first idea, I mean the first argument I developed when my supervisor asked about why this research was important was that urban planning practice is continuously moving beyond traditional government into more collaborative approach. it was not only occurred in the global north like America or in the European countries, but it began to be implemented in the global south like India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Hong Kong, and many other countries in the southern part of the earth. So basically, this has become a paradigm that continuously extended all over the world. So it is important for us to think about it carefully. Because of what? Because of since the urban planning practice transformed into new and collaborative approach, there is the emergence of active communities. Community begin to take a look at the opportunity to be participated in the development process. You might see maybe in Kuala Lumpur when you develop when the government decided to change the functions of urban park, for example, for a specific purpose of government building, then perhaps some community group will show up and then raise their concern about the decisions of government. So this is a part of active communities. They then, after that, they will ask for the roles. They will ask for the opportunity to share their ideas. And then, for example, the government then decided to invite the community to share the idea and then give the money and then let the community to develop their own areas, or let's say to develop the park based on their own opinions. So this kinds of process is common and then begin to influence so many practices in the global south. So community initiative is a phenomenon that we need to think about, especially when it comes to the context where the governance system or the environments of the political and social spheres are still challenging in a way that, for example, I don't want to mention, but let's say in China or in Vietnam, where the country are strictly working under like a bit top-down and rigid government, the spheres of social and political of development in their countries are still can be said as soft-authoritarian. Soft-authoritarian means like government pretend to facilitate the growth and facilitate the roles of community, but actually they are not happy with the participations of community. So at some point they will guide the community participations through a lot of rigid regulations and policies. So it's like a fake participation. So this is a problem because these kinds of situations happen in many countries. I'm not saying that in Indonesia this happened a lot, but at some points, in some cases, it is happened. Especially when we see that Indonesia broadly consists of like 33 provinces, 33 or 35 or 33 provinces, let's say, and then 100 cities, and the implementations of community initiative may face different environments. Like maybe in Jakarta, the government are very happy and they try to encourage the community to work more than the normal they can do. But maybe you go to the northern side of Indonesia, let's say to Manado or to Gorontalo, the government are still strictly follow the tradition where they are not happy or they do not allow community to work through the process of participation. So these kinds of difference need to be emphasized and need to be seen in terms of whether Indonesia are good enough or already how can I say, like relevant in order to breed to support the emergence of community initiative, and how the community initiative can contribute to the change of practices of urban planning in local government level, at the government levels, local government levels. So that is the introductions of why then my research was developed. At that time, it was quite tricky because my supervisor kind of like asking a lot of questions. I met Hakim when I was frustrated because my supervisor kept telling me that this is not nonsense, or it wasn't really good because these kinds of situation happen to all over the world. You couldn't really say that in England the government really happy with the public participations, while in Indonesia the government wasn't really happy with the public participation. And then I was confused with that questions and I couldn't answer. And then I went to Hakim office, for example. I shared the story. So this kinds of process. And then I came back after that. I rewrite my thesis. I add some emphasize. I add new points until finally, after like 3 months or 4 months, the introductions can be presented in a solid way, by which all the supervisor could not have a little hole to ask or to criticize the reason of why you develop this research. So this is important, students, for you to put the emphasize or the reasoning of using the research. Sometimes I find students only care about they have the data or they have the interest of doing a specific topic. But when we start to ask, for example, I ask why you decide to use a market, a street market, as a topic of your research, and he just said, simply said, the street market. I saw that street market and I found that there was a lot of traffic congestion in front of my street market, and that's all. And I said, was there any theoretical contributions when you asked that questions? Is there any potential policy implications when you ask that questions? And they start to lose the reasons. So then I asked them, I asked him to come back and try to reflect upon all the questions and try to redevelop the introduction. So the moral story is that if you develop introductions for your research, then you need to be carefully do it in the subsequential manner. You can't leave it in one punch time, but you need to do it repeatedly and improve it several times, so then finally you can get the best versions of your introductions. Okay. Okay, this is just an important, a simple thing to share, but perhaps you already know and familiar with Creative Kampung or Kampung Creative. So I then decided to choose the key issues, why it is important, and then what is the main issue. So then I decided to use this topic as my research. For example, so many community initiatives in the global south, according to my literature review, they faced a lot of problems because the government did not really capable of working together with them. And then also there was a lot of problem in terms of rules and regulations, sometimes conflicting with each other. They didn't have a lot of proper forum to let the community work together on share opinion with the government. And also there was a lot of confusions and conflicts, especially between government and the community in terms of influence about the decisions making at the neighborhood level. So these kinds of process are very challenging, especially when the government are not ready yet, the community are not capable yet, and the private sector are also missing, cannot work together. So this is situations that is commonly found in developing countries. So this is the fundamental aspects of my research issues. So okay, after that we need to develop a research question. It can be a lot of approaches in developing a research questions. Some scholars say that in order to develop a research questions, you have to be using a logic of sequential, like the big questions and the small questions to support the big questions. Some other scholars may think about you can just put one research questions and you don't need to put additional research questions. Some other researcher will think about you need to develop a research questions that can clearly count it and then clearly mention the reason and the process of your research. So there are so many. But then here, what I did, I picked what my supervisor said, that in order to develop a research questions, you have to follow the sequence of your thesis, of your research. So it begins with the contextual understanding. So you have to ask about the contextual understanding. You have to ask about the theoretical underpinning, the theoretical debate, the gap about your research. So don't try to focus on your case, but try to raise up your level of discussions at the fundamental level of theoretical level. I'm not saying this is important for undergraduate students, but perhaps for master students like you all in UITM, you need to start thinking about using these kinds of uh, research questions that begin with the theoretical discussions or theoretical debate. So you won't be trapped only in discussions about the practical aspect, but you can also, but by this kinds of approach, you can start to think about what is the contributions of your research at the end of your research to the theory. So this is important. So first of all, you develop the questions around the theoretical aspect that you want to criticize or you want to emphasize. And then after the theoretical aspect, you start with the context. What happened in that area, or what happened in that object, or in your research object. And then after the context questions, you start to ask about your main research questions, which is in my case, that was to evaluate the overall characteristics, potentials, and challenges of the community initiatives and their impact to the overall of planning practice in Indonesia, let's say. And then I decided to use the research questions following my analytical framework. There are three characteristics of actor, arenas, and governance processes, and how the cultures shifting slowly through the process of community initiatives, emergence, and development. And finally, the last questions relates to the research aim of providing suggestions for institutional strategies. So research questions, and then it should be connected to your study aim and study objectives. And you keep doing these kinds of research questions development through mistake and then improve, mistake and improve. At some point, there is an also opportunity that you will use the research question, then you continue to work on your research, but at the end of your research, once all the information is obtained, once all the data and informations are analyzed, then you come back to the research questions, and then you make a little adjustment to the question. So that is the process of how qualitative research works. It's quite dynamic, flexible, but then you have to follow the process. Yeah, this is just a theoretical underpinning. By it is more about my research. For example, I decided to focus on the process of community initiative emerged in Indonesia at neighborhood level, because there is a three stages of process where it was explained in that picture. And then what I'm going to what I did, what I analyzed in terms of how the emergence and the process of community initiative based planning practice, reshape planning practice, are based on these kinds of analytical framework. So this is the core, this is the embryo, or this is the brain. If you say that the brain is most important part of your human body, so let's say this is the brain, or maybe some people will say this is the heart of a human body. So I think that the analytical framework is essential to guide your research. So find this, develop this, and then use this as a part of designing a research design, research questions, research focus, data collections, analysis, and so forth. Yeah, we decide to use the researcher role. Okay. we have there is a process where you as a researcher being the subject, where you can put your comment on the first hand, or you can be the third actor. You identify and assess other comments and opinions and organize them as an input for your research. It's up to you. It depends on what do you need for your research. And then why case study, and how relevant case study for your research. Case study is to answer research aim and objectives. And this approach was considered suitable because yeah, it provides the opportunity for you to explore all data and informations that can be covered by only nominal or values. You can't say that if you see a data about the growth of populations, let's say from 7% to 9%, the quantitative analysis will guide you only to find that there is a 2% of population growth in your area. But what is going on with the growth of the population? Here, the qualitative research may dig in more details about what is the implications of the 2% of the increase in terms of populations to the living conditions in the city, for example. And the government will say that since there's a 2% increase, a lot of economic economic businesses and industries are growing rapidly, and in terms of environment there is a lot of problems in terms of populations and home and domestic waste, which are difficult to manage. So these kinds of qualitative research may answer things that cannot be explained by only value or apa namanya, in Malay we said angka, ya, angka, or ya, nilai. And then the research of case study reflects some aspect that need definition, descriptions, and causal explanation. Um, that 2% of the increase of populations may not say anything without we define and we describe it and connect the relationship to the other elements of surrounding our research topic. And then the research questions also need to be carefully thought, whether it contains some things that you need to explore, like a human opinion, human perceptions, interpretations, which all of which are uncountable. Then you have to decide it with case study research or qualitative research. I had a student, for example, she had a how can I say, children's drawing, and the children's drawing was a bit challenging, but interesting and innovative enough. And she was trying to interpret the children's drawing in relations to the impact of describing what people or what children need in terms of the development of open spaces. I said that qualitative research might guide her a lot in terms of providing connections, findings, and opinions of the children instead of a quantitative research. Or perhaps it could be work with a mixed method. At some point, she could do with quantitative research of exploring the elements, meta scoring about the drawings. But at some in parallel, she could also add some explanations about what are the reason behind the children using this kind or putting these kinds of picture in on their paper. So a mixed method perhaps also important at some point to supplementary each other. I mean, to support the design that consists of quantitative and qualitative aspects. Well, it goes back to my research design. I have 3 stages of research. The first one, I assess the process. I mean, I establish the theoretical framework first, and then assess the process of the emergence of community initiative. And then the final phase, I did assess the process of community initiative reshape the overall planning practice in the neighborhood. So there is a there are three stages. The first, the analytical framework, and then the second one is to identify your research topic, I mean the research object, identify how it could emerge, and what is its relation to the surrounding areas, and then finally you should connect your study object with the topic, which is how it makes influence or implicate the change in planning practice in the neighborhood area in Indonesia. So these three stages represent a whole process. So when your supervisor asks about where is your research design, basically they want to know about the big picture of how you could share about going here from there, from here to there, which is from the introductions to the conclusions. How many stages? What kinds of methods? Are the stages relevant with the objectives of your research? So all these things need to be put into account together, all together in a systematical and logical ways, and where all the supervisor, all the student fellows, let's say, could really understand about the process of your research. So this is important in qualitative research. Every time you do the research, then you have to go back to see. Let's say like this is the third month of my research, for example. Then you should think about where is it now in the research design map. Oh, okay, I am still in the case study overview. And then you have to be carefully checking what should be done after this. Oh, there is an analysis and synthesis and conclusions and like something like that. Even if you can't really strictly follow the structure, you can go back again to the analytical framework quite flexibly. But by having these kinds of map, you can understand clearly about where are you in your research. Well, again, go back to my research. The case study itself, I have two stages of case study. The first stage is to develop or to conduct a preliminary survey to understand and to select the cases. My topic is about the community initiative and its impact to the change of planning practice at the neighborhood level, from top down to bottom up. So there's so many cases of community initiative in Indonesia, but I have to decide where is the case, where is the good case to represent all the cases in Indonesia. So then the preliminary stage was conducted. Once the preliminary stage was conducted and you got the good case study areas, then you can start with the case study operationalization. You do the data collections, you do the data analysis, and then you interpret the result. And once you got the result and the synthesis, then you can start to write your thesis. Okay, this is the process of case study design, from the research aim to the final case study operationalizations. Okay, I go deeply one by one. This is the stage one. No, this is the stage one. Stage one is preliminary survey. In the preliminary survey, I did two steps. The first one was to introduce and explore the Indonesian cases for this research. So I said here because I already knew, but when I did this research, when I was doing this research, I didn't really know about how many community initiatives. So I begin of identify my case study object by exploring the Indonesian context. I did read a lot about the national and local planning system policy and practices, and then I began to Google from documentary review to track and gather information about community initiatives in Indonesia, especially that use the theme of creative industries. At that time, I got more than 50 creative kampung in all over Indonesia, and then I had to select took a number of cases in order to continue to my research. So then I did a case study selection, by which the first stage of doing the case study selections was to develop the criteria. I used the criteria development based upon the aim and objectives. At that time, there were 4 criteria. I will show you later. and then based on the criteria, I got the cases. So yeah, there are 4 selection criteria. It is also a tricky part because your supervisor might ask you and might check you whether your selection criteria are relevant enough to support your research. Because if you use the wrong criteria, then you will come to the wrong case, which finally it would put your research in irrelevant result. So this is important stage, and you kind of like need to be carefully think about, because let's say if you want to do a research about COVID-19 and its impact to urban kampung in Malaysia Peninsula, but then you forget to put a criterion that say the case study should be located in the Peninsula Malaysia. And finally, you came to the conclusions that there are a bunch of case studies, but located in the opposite, in the Borneo side of Malaysia, and the results are different. So, and the result and the study finding are irrelevant. And then your examiner will ask, why you talk about the Malaysian Peninsula, but you use the case from the Malaysian Borneo side. So this is problem. So be careful, students, with this kinds of preliminary survey, especially with the selections of the criteria. You have to be clearly quantitative in this way. For example, you should be having a lot of clear in your mind about defining your case criteria. For example, whether it is in the scale of community, whether it is in the scale of city, or whether it is in the scale of region, you have to define it based on your research requirement. And then there is also a time period. For example, you think about the time period, whether your research need to be assessed within the durations of 5 years, 2 years, or perhaps only 1 month. Let's say the research is about COVID-19, but then you put the criteria is 10 years. For what? This is not important. Instead of enriching your data will misguide you to the process of finding a result that are not robust and not relevant for your topic of COVID-19. So again, I would suggest you to take a look and do a process of developing a selection criteria carefully, repeatedly. Ask your student fellows or ask your supervisor whether all the criteria meet the requirements of choosing the case, the proper case. Well, this is to show you that actually the list is more than 21, but this is just to show you that according to my criteria, when I develop these 4 criteria, I list all creative kampung in Indonesia. For example, this is I said that the practice should be already organized in a long period, which is 10 years at least. And then the kampung should engage with culture and creative industries. And the kampung should involve multi-stakeholders, which means there should be a government, there should be a local community, private sector, and NGO involved in the process. And also there is a boundary that need to be clearly defined, that the creative kampung should be located at the level of kelurahan or village. I don't know in Malaysia, perhaps bandar. Bandar kan? I forget the name, but it is a city, and then after the city there is a sub-district, and then that is the level that I want to use at this research. So I put all the cases, the potential cases, into a table, and then I made a scoring style of, this is just to summarize, that finally I went to 2 cases, which is two of the oldest, which located in kelurahan, the super sub district, let's say that like that, and then main activities are in the creative industries. Unfortunately, they are both located in Surakarta, the place where my current university is located, Universitas Sebelas Maret in Surakarta. So, yeah, that is the reason. Then my supervisor came back to me and asked, "Did you do it by uh, by how can I say, like sudah direncanakan, let's say in Malaya? Did you plan it to make it in one city so that you can have easy access for data collection? I said no. And then I show them the process of selecting the case studies. So then finally my supervisor was agreed, and then they understood that the process wasn't really because of my process of make it closer to one and each other, but coincidentally all the informations, all the criteria guide me to these two case studies. Well, this is just the picture. The first one is Kampung Batik Kauman. Perhaps Malaysian students, I would suggest you, if you go to Surakarta later, or Dr. Hakim, when you come to Surakarta later, to Solo, to deliver a class in UNS, then you can go to this kampung and buy perhaps coffee or batik. I know that there is also so many beautiful batik in Malaysia, but each of us represent a different styles of batik. So you come and see, this is the creative kampung in Kauman, and these are in Laweyan, and this is in Laweyan. So there are two case studies. Finally, once you get the case study, you start to go back to the research aim. I have two case studies. Then what should I do with these two case studies? Okay, I go back to the research aim to explore how community initiative emerge, and to examine, to analyze how they reshape the overall practice in the neighborhood level, planning practice at the neighborhood level. So I show you in this slide that all the four objectives are linked with the research method: literature review, documentary review, questionnaire, interviews, and a mix, a triangulations process of them into a synthesis and conclusions. So yeah, after the preliminary stage, I mentioned there were two stages in my case study research. So I did explain the first stage, and now we are entering the second stage, which is the case study operationalizations. Let me check the time. Okay. Yeah, the stage two, the case study operationalization. It consists of three phases: data collections, data analysis, and interpretations. Data collections, mix of documentary reviews, semi-structured interviews, and questionnaire. Data analysis, there is a compilations, transcribing process, coding, and so forth. I will explain later. And interpretations is a process where all data that already analyzed are guided into a specific how then you cook it. I maybe my language is like that. Once all the data come to you in front of you, then you have to put it into a bowl and then cook it for your purpose. And here in my case, I cook it with a framework analysis. You might have to do it with maybe content analysis. You could do it with perhaps discourse analysis. There are so many practices of doing qualitative research analysis. But in this case, I use the framework analysis. And then finally, you go to the ethics. And then data collection method, there is a documentary review, semi-structured interview, and questionnaire. What is documentary review? Documentary review is just simply saying, I would explain it like this. You have a lot of documents in front of you, you read it, you put a coding process where you can see some informations are relevant, you put a number, or you put a code, and you put it, for example, maybe in a software like FIFO. I did learn from Hakim in terms of using this FIFO. And then you can also use maybe Microsoft Excel by simply put them into a table, classifying a specific theme in front of, I mean, on the first row, and then you put the information you get from, for example, in your local plan, from your regulations, from your document report, and then put them into the Excel or into a FIFO document. So this is the process of documentary review, and use them as a part of analyzing your topic. And then semi-structured interview, I already mentioned earlier that it is a process where you use a number of persons as a key important persons to be explored in terms of their opinions. So because their opinion may have fundamental contributions and knowledge for your research. So in this case, I use policymakers, Creative Kampung representatives, or people working under the organizations of Creative Kampung, and then creative workers living, working in the neighborhood, like a batik industries worker, or perhaps the how can I say in English? I forget. Seniman. Yeah, art worker. I don't know. Sorry. And then independent external figure, which are, let's say, academics, expert, activists, and so forth. So by having all these kinds of stakeholders and their comments and opinion, you might enrich your data with different perspectives. Then you can start to analyze together with the result of documentary review. Well, yeah, I did interview 27 actors, stakeholders, within 3 months. And then be careful and be clear in your thesis in explaining how did you or how are you going to do the interview, because your supervisor will or your examiner will ask you about whether you do it in the good way or in the wrong way. For example, there is rules of the game. If you want to do a semi-structured interview, you have to be clearly sure that you said you ask them, I mean the interview, you ask the interview personally, because the name is personal interview. Because what if you, for example, if I want to interview Nur, but there is a Dr. Hakim there, standing next to Nur. Perhaps some questions. The question is about whether Nur is happy or not of doing study in UITM. Of course, Nur cannot answer easily because there is a pressure. There is a Dr. Hakim next, sitting, I mean, standing next to us. So this is important aspect that you need to think and carefully describe that the process follow the minimum requirement of doing a semi-structured interview. I said, for example, in my research, I did the interview using a direct face-to-face approach, and almost all the interviews were held in the interviewee's house, although some of them were held in the hotel lobbies and restaurants. And be careful, don't using a place where it is dangerous for you to do the research. For example, you suddenly meet your interviewees at the top of railway, for example, then you start to conduct the interview in the railway area. So don't do like that. I mean, use the good place to do the interview where you can clearly hear their voice, so it won't guide you to the misunderstanding or misinterpretations about the result, because it is important. Once you got wrong misinterpretations from your interviewee, not only did you fail to show the relevant result, but you might also face a problem in terms of complaint from your interviewees later on. So be careful. And also you have to clearly explain how long you did the interview process, whether maybe 60 minutes, 90 minutes, you have to mention it, because it is important for your supervisors or for your examiner to know the overall process of doing the interview. Well, yeah, this is just the list of my interviewees during my research, and it was, I forget, 27 interviewees representing government, community leaders, batik industries worker or businessmen, and academics. And you have to be proportional in picking the number of interviewees, because by having a more proportional, then the findings, I mean the opinions, will be more relevant, rather than you put, for example, only 3 from Kauman but you have 20 in Lawean. So it's kind of a bit tricky. It's not a fixed rule of the game, but it is important for you to follow a bit quite, how can I say, balance in terms of picking the number of interviewees if you have 2 cases. Well, yeah, questionnaire is simple. I mean, I'm not going to explain it in detail where here because questionnaire is more quantitative, to be honest. But some people may use questionnaire in order to get more uh, uh, interviewees or can I say respondents to get opinions about something. You may have an open question where when you interview 100% with open questions, you might anticipate that it comes with maybe 100 different sentences that perhaps quite challenging to manage. But it depends on your research method. If you want to use it for specific purpose, then you can do it. Don't worry about that. Yeah, this is the process of operationalizing my questionnaire. Also, I did explain how did I deliver the questionnaire, how did I make sure that the person is relevant or important and suitable enough for answering my question, and also how did I use the ethic approve from them and so forth. This is what I did and I explain all in my research methodology. So be clearly in explaining the methodology in your proposal or maybe in your thesis later. And this is the process of analysis. Transcribing is just the process of you pick all the important informations into from the recording or from the notes into your specific document. Let's say you put it into Microsoft Excel, or let's say you put it into N5, NVivo, or and so forth. But at least you already pick some important information and drop it in how can I say, like a good process. If you record, like say for example, saya pergi ke pasar in bahasa Indonesia, let's say Dr. Hakim mau pergi ke ruang tandas misalnya, then you have to clearly transcribe it with the same meaning. Be careful because when you transcribe it wrong, and then you will face a complaint from your interview, and it is also against the rules of the game, of the ethics. So be careful because that is why in the process of transcribing the interview, you may have to go back to your interviewees and asking their comment whether the transcript process is good enough for them or not. If I'm not mistaken, maybe Dr. Hakim also remember in Liverpool, in our university when we were doing our PhD, they even really concerned with that until they put in the system, right? That the transcribing process should be uploaded into a system. And then it should be also mentioned that the interviewees have an opportunity to see back the transcript and make complain about it if just in case the transcript is not good for them. So this is to show that the emphasis of doing good ethics in terms of qualitative research is so important. So this is the lesson learned from us, for us. I mean, for UTM, so UITM, and then for UNS to learn about how we develop the ethics as a part of make sure assuring that the research is doing in the good way for the community and responsible manners. And then after the coding process, we go to the coding process. I'm sorry that I couldn't show you the process of my coding because it was a big data in the Excel, but I use Microsoft Excel rather than the NVivo. And then in the Microsoft Excel, I put a tagline like in each column, there is a based on the framework. I put the framework A, framework B, framework C, and then all the informations that relevant to framework A, I put them together. Framework B, and then I follow in for the framework C. Then I see how the sentences from different interviewees can be seen as a coherent and related with each other, and I can put a summary comment from that point on. So that is the process of making a coding. And then yeah, I forget, it's not important because this is more related to the questionnaire. Okay, then after the coding, the final stage is to do the verifications. You're rechecking all the informations. Did you really do it, the transcribing process in the good way? Whether is there any missing data and information? is there any potential redundant or conflicting data information? So here, this is the process where you can reorganize and make a good touch up for your data. It's like a make it chuck up better, but don't make a fake data. Be careful. You need to be committed of using the data in the good way, but try to erase the data that are not relevant, not relevant, and try to try to exclude all the data that are potentially conflicting with each other. So that is the basic reason why you have to do the verifications process. And finally, that I already mentioned, there is a research ethic, and this research ethic is a process that the institutions that support you or facilitate you to do the research uh, make sure that you do the research in the right way and effective. Once the research ethic, actually I have this thing, but I'm not sure it is good enough for us to do it. Well, okay, that's all for today. I mean, am I in the good time? It's 1.5. Yeah. If you have any questions, please just asking, or you can just drop a questions in your how can I say, in your chat room. Although I am struggling to find the chat room here in Google. Okay, I got it.
On
Sorry
the
about that.
right.
Yeah. And hopefully all of you are still here. I mean, not sleeping. I did
So,
mendongeng.
Dr. Chris, have you finished your presentation?
Yes. All
Okay, all right.
presentations are there. Yeah.
There was I think it was a good advice for all of the students for the undergraduate and also postgraduate in order to produce a good research, because Dr. Chris mentioned from the start until the end, there must be a systematic approach in doing research. There must be a detail. There must be a justifications, right? In terms of creating the research questions, aim and objectives. It must integrated in our thesis in each chapter, subsequent chapters, right? So that was a very good advice. And then in terms of selecting the case studies, okay, it is new for me. Okay, there
Mm,
must be you need to have a reason. You need to
mm,
justify why you select case study. There must be criteria to
mm,
select, not just randomly chose. Oh, I like this area, so I chose this area. So there must be a process. There must be questions asked. So that is new for me, because I
mm.
did a pure quantitative research. So,
Yeah.
like Dr. Chris mentioned, I just use a theory and just prove it. Is it right or wrong? Is it
Mm,
the same patterns or the same pattern? Where qualitative research is more of a subjective kind of approach, more to like expression, opinions,
yeah.
perceptions, and
Yeah.
it's more detailed and more rigorous, I think so. Because for quantitative research is most of it is straightforward. For
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
for my PhD research, I got equation, calculation, I just follow that methods.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Shafika, Shamil, hi, how can I get record the presentation just now? Okay, if you are UITM students, I will share the recording session with the lecturers. And for University of Sebelas Maret, we'll share with Dr. Chris. Okay, so far we do not have a question. I have one question,
Yeah. Yeah.
Chris. I have a
Yeah.
few
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
No worry. Yeah.
all right. Okay, there is one question from Dr. Siti Mazwin. She is a head of program for this master
Ah.
program.
Ah. Hi, Dr.
Please,
Siti.
Dr.
Hello, good evening, Dr. Chris,
Good evening,
and
Dr. Siti.
to
Nice to
all
meet you.
the students, both from UMS and UITM. Okay, first, thank you for a very good lecture for our subject CPA 763 Research Methodology, and a very interesting topic. Okay, I have one question, but I must say this qualitative method for me is quite difficult. and challenging. For my thesis, I conducted both methods, but when I compare it, I find the quantitative method is more objective. I can see what I want to achieve, and it's quite easy, not to say easy, it was more clear to me. However, because my supervisor wanted me to do both methods, so I still brave myself to do the qualitative.
Yeah.
Okay. What I find about this qualitative method, for every type of the that you mentioned in your lecture, there is a specific protocol, I would say, to follow. Okay, the rules to follow. But I have always been confused about the the what is semi-structured interview and a full structured interview, because um, if I do interviews, my question is, which would be better or which is more appropriate to use, full structure interview or semi-structured interview? Because for what I understand, a full structure interview is you interview the respondents according to a set of questions. So it's, let's say I have 10 questions, so I interview respondent 1, the same question I ask respondent 2, and so forth. Then I can easily compare the answers. But in semi-structured interviews, it's like an open-ended, correct, Dr. Chris?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Semi-structured. Yeah, so you ask them the questions, but the questions are, how to say, how it's not very it's not rigid, like it's like open-ended, correct? So you ask you let the respondent answer.
Yeah.
So yeah, so can you give advice, how or how do I approach it, like which would be better when I interview? Because I personally think the more structured question is easier for me to compare.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right.
Then I can say, okay, respondent 1 they say it's like this, respondent 2 says like this, respondent 3, and so for that I can easily put in a table and compare their answers. Okay,
Yeah.
but semi structured, I find it a challenge because then I have to interpret, I have to categorize, and according to a certain theme, according to the theory. So I think it's very, the steps are more. As I can see
Yeah.
from your own slide, you conducted very many steps, correct? Even in
Yeah.
quantitative, we can do like, just to do the regression, we have like 14 steps
Yeah.
just to find out what's the most significant variable,
Yeah.
for example. So for qualitative
Yeah.
also, I didn't calculate how many steps you conducted,
Yeah.
but I think it's very difficult to interpret people's perception or people's concern. So yeah,
Yeah.
I have to admit, I think qualitative is the nature is not easy. Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
very interesting because yeah, you can get to hear people's ideas. Yeah, but again,
Yeah.
so back to my question,
Mm.
how do you choose the right, the I mean the best approach? Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, that's great. Many thanks, Dr. Siti, for your questions. It's quite tricky because, yeah, first of all, it's always like that. Those who are familiar with qualitative research. Sorry, Dr. Hakim, is my voice is good enough because I found that my picture is stopped. I hope the voice is good. Fine.
Yeah, your voice is clear.
All right, okay. Yeah, so basically, for those who are familiar with quantitative research, they might find that qualitative is very difficult. Um, for those who are familiar with qualitative research, they thought that quantitative is things to be avoided. Why? Because for me, like my discussions with daily discussions with Dr. Hakim, Dr. Siti, when we were together in PhD, I said, what? Why it's so difficult for me to understand your research, Hakim? Because every time I check his PC or his laptop, it shows so many sophisticated software where a lot of image, a lot of thing. I asked him, how did you organize this data with map info, if I'm not mistaken. You taught me map info, and then you taught me about how to do it with ArcGIS and so forth. For me, it was challenging because it takes a lot of time for me to go back to the beginning and learn about how to use the software, or how to develop an analysis and model, or how to calculate even. It's quite difficult. So for me to say that quantitative is more difficult for qualitative, it is more in terms of how you master, how you familiarize yourself with the software, the developments of the method, I mean the developments of the model, and then how to analyze with the software, and how to make a data input, and how to interpret. But for qualitative research, I would say that it is easy. No, 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 not easy. I mean, it is better for me, because why? Because I can just, by having one paper or three papers, and you have one pen, you can do everything. And that is a qualitative research. So easy in the way to manage more technical aspect. But the problem is always, once you get the data, so many people get lost with that. Like what Dr. Siti said, perhaps the decisions of whether using open-end questions, or a structured interview, or semi-structured interview, it goes back to the reason of whether your interview is prepared to support what kinds of aspect on your research. For example, if you want to dig in information about the impact of COVID-19 to the change in people habit in commuting from hinterland of Kuala Lumpur to the metro, to the inner city of Kuala Lumpur, then if you are sure that the aspect that you want to ask is about, for example, about the mode of choice, let's say, or the satisfactory upon the service of public transport, for example, then you can just use a structured question, because you already know that you want to address the capacity, or the satisfactory level of commuter in terms of using public transport within a specific element. But just in case you want to ask about the satisfactory levels of commuters of using public transport, but you didn't decide of a specific element, and you want to let it flow, you want to let it flow, you want to grasp, or you want to anticipate some informations that might not be anticipated earlier. Let's say you put your questions around three aspects: the financial satisfactory level, I mean the cost of traveling, the safety level, and let's say the time accuracy level. So if you are concerned with these three aspects, then you can use the structured interview, and the result will come easily for you to manage and be fitted into these three aspects. But if you are going to anticipate a potential of, let's say, the passenger or the commuter said about, I'm happy in terms of using public transport because it helps me to do the prayers, because it has a lot of time for me to wait in the transit terminal, and I can do like salat, or prayer, like a 5-day prayer and so forth. Then it is a place where it is a statement that could not be easily anticipated earlier. So goes back to the idea of whether you have a specific set of dimensions to be analyzed in your research. If it is flowing, if you keen on let the answer to be developed throughout the process of interview, then you have to use the semi-structured interview. But if you have and you are sure about the specific topic with the specific and rigid dimensions of the topic of the phenomenon, then you have to use the how can I say, the structured interview. Well, there is no rules of the game. Again, the problem, not the problem, the feature or the characteristics of qualitative research is that even if we have provisional steps, everything can be managed in quite flexibly manner, quite flexible. So there is no specific statement whether structured interview is better than semi-structured or vice versa. But again, I would suggest you to go back to your research and fill it. How can I like do evening contemplations before you sleep? Sometimes you close your eyes and think about your questions, and maybe in the early morning you can have a question, the answer that, oh, okay, I will use the semi-structured interview because I'm thinking about to anticipate a lot of informations that are not covered by my knowledge. But if you have the knowledge, then be specific, and then you can just go through with the structured interview. Sorry about that. I hope the question is answered, Dr. Siti. Although I have no idea about what did you do with your research, but I know that I do believe that uh, by reading your research question, you might have an impressions that your research might be suitable with semi-structured or structured interview. But if you are still confused, that is the process of doing and decide it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
You're welcome.
All right, please welcome Dr. Nisham. Dr. Nisham
Okay.
is one of the EA 763 lecturer.
Yeah. Good evening.
Hello, good evening, Dr.
Yeah.
Nisham.
Good evening,
Please
Dr. Chris. Okay.
start
My
to
name
meet you.
is. Yeah. I have one question. Yeah. I found that we acknowledge the importance of paradigm and theoretical framework in shaping our qualitative research. But my question is, how can we make sure that the theory that we use is parallel with paradigm and theoretical framework? Do you have any
Hmm.
answer? Thank you.
Okay, okay, that's great. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, it's quite difficult to explain, but I would try to explain it a little bit like this. Of course, you have your research topic, and then you have the background, the introductions, and some people might use the introductions or the background, might develop the background at the beginning of your research. Some others might leave it as a draft and then go through to the analytical process or the theoretical debate, and then goes back to the introductions and retouch up it to fit into your topic. But the point about whether the literature review used in the research are linked or swiftly connected to the analytical framework is quite tricky, because like this, you normally do for the literature review first. You read about the topic of your research. For example, we talk about planning for transit-oriented development. Then there are three areas that you need to learn. For example, the first one is about the planning as a philosophical understanding. The planning theories, what is the planning and what kinds of transitions in terms of planning. And then you go to the transport, public transport, what is public transport and transport. And then at the end of your literature review, you need to compare both cases and then put it into argumentations, like you build whether planning for public transport is working well or not working properly, or there is always a challenging in terms of practicing planning for public transport. And by having these kinds of theoretical underpinning at the end of your two discussions, then you start look at how the existing researcher or the existing journals work with the framework of describing these kinds of theoretical gap. Oh, you can then find some researcher like Mark Taylor Jones or maybe Cecilia Wong explain about these efficiencies of transit-oriented development to describe planning practice throughout the governance process, for example. Some others might say the problem lies in terms of sustainability framework. So by using specific themes of your analytical framework, then you can develop the analytical framework. So I don't think the literature will be far or too far from your analytical framework if you develop the analytical framework on the basis of your literature review process. Although the process of doing the literature review is not fully completed. So, but at least you have the idea, and then you grasp some literature or some journals discussing about this topic, and then you can see how they use the framework. Okay, they use the analytical framework on the basis of sustainability approach. Perhaps some others use actor network, some other use maybe mobility culture, and so forth. So they can use the element of these things, and then you can decide to use it as a framework for you, or you can mix the approach. Let's say you use the the resilience element, and you combine it with sustainability. Then you can mix together, and you can say that the framework is on the basis of sustainable resilience. And you pick like 5 elements, and then after you decide the 5 elements, you go back to the literature and befit it, and make adjustment to follow the process. So it's like a repetition process. You start from the beginning and goes to the analytical framework. Once you got the analytical framework, you come back to the literature and fulfill some parts that are missing or disconnected from the process. So that is the process of why qualitative research is always suggests you to do repetitions, goes back to your process, and then go forward. So this is a kind of art, to be honest. It's like doing everything in your common sense, but still have to follow strict and how can I say, like detailed explanations about your process. I hope the questions is answered, although I'm not really sure that it is clear in practical level, but I hope in terms of philosophical level, it can be answered. Thank you, Dr. Hisam.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you for the question, Dr. Nisham. I think we have like 5 minutes left. Last question for you, please, is especially to our students. For our students, actually, our research environment is changing because of the current pandemic, COVID-19. Do you have any advice for our students who plan to do a qualitative research? Because nowadays, I'm not sure in Indonesia, but in Malaysia we have a like control order. So, and then people work from home. So it is hard for the students to get the data, to interview, to the face-to-face interactions, focus group discussion, and all. Do you have any advice for them?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it good.
Right.
Right. Good. Yeah, it is relevant because even the normal class activity can be shifted into online. So then why research cannot be shifted also to the online platform? I answer with 2 experience I did. Like for example, in the early stage of our class, I mentioned that I had an opportunity to join studio with UCL students, and those UCL students actually conducted qualitative research without visiting the actual case study. They used the surfing hand of students living surrounding the area to get the data and informations, and transfer all the information throughout the online platform. Then the name of the method is digital ethnography. So for example, Dr. Hakim, you are in UITM in Malaysia, but you are interested to explore about the COVID-19 and its impact on community development in Surakarta, in Solo. Then I pick 3 students here, like for example, I have Muhammad Zainuddin from Indonesia. I have, who else? Let me check. Yeah, I have Apin Fitria. I have Ainan maybe from Malaysia, and I have the other one, and I introduce them to you. And then you start to arrange a communication platform that you can make discussions every day, every hour, and you put both Apin Zainuddin and his friend to be located in a specific place where you want to get the information and make a report. So this is a process of digital ethnography. It might not be ideal, but at least this is the process where we could do during this kinds of pandemic and restrictions period. And the second one, I did a research about the impact of cargo. I mean the cargo ferry. It was more about the implications of the connectivity between Philippines and Indonesia. Once the Roro ferry is a roll-on, roll-off ferry, was presented by the government. How they could improve their business because of the emergence or the opening of Roro ferry. At that time, I was in Manila, but the case study area was in Zamboanga. Zamboanga is a small city in Philippines, which is at that time was very dangerous. There was a lot of terrorists and to be honest, there was a lot of problems of people missing. So I couldn't really deliver the questions to my interviewees. What I did at that time was finally we used an online platform. We used a survey monkey. You know, the name is Survey Monkey. Now you can use also the Google Forms. You make questions and then you share it with a link with email, and then just in case you are not satisfied with the process of using these kinds of Survey Monkey or how can I say that platform, then you can also do with Zoom meeting. You put your questions on your hand and you do the interview throughout the process with Zoom or Google Meeting. And basically, that's all we can do, Dr. Hakim, all the students during these kinds of pandemic. Perhaps the studio, we in UNS also did try to use online studio, which is not ideal, to be honest. It's not ideal because students didn't have a feel of doing research exactly connected to the people in the village. But yeah, rather than putting them in danger, so we decided to use it online platform. Well, still, there are so many lessons from that process. Especially, they become more familiar with online platform of doing working on collaborations throughout, like Mentimeter or maybe Jamboard and so forth. Yeah, there is always a blessing in disguise. So I guess we can't really say that during these kinds of pandemic, the problem may limit the improvement of students. But when you lost some part, then you get another. That's the lessons. Well, thank you.
Okay, that was a good answer. I think we've come to the end of the session. I would like to express my gratitude, my thanks to Dr. Chrisna Permana for sharing his knowledge and thoughts and experience to all of us here, and to all participants who joined the session. And I hope that in the future we in UiTM and also Universitas Sebelas Maret could continue further collaborate our ideas and knowledge, and maybe I don't know, maybe we have like sharing studio session or
Sure.
or what can. So
yeah, we have
so
also
that's
some
I
lecturer
wish
come here
think
from
we
UNS. Yeah, there's Ibu Kusumastuti, Dr. Kusumastuti, and Dr. Yeah, Sudi Wahyono. Yeah, glad to be here with you.
maybe in the future I might try to invite
Sure.
my other Khalid,
Sure.
Dr. Khalid or Dr. Aziz
Sure, that's
from
great.
the
Yeah,
EPIC.
yeah. From
We
the
might
agent.
have
Yeah,
another reunion,
good.
Liverpoolian. Okay, I think that's it. It's already late night. It's already night already. So I wish all the best to Dr. Krishna and also to
Yeah.
all participants. With that, thank you very much everyone for joining this session. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and have a good night. Okay, thank you everyone.
Good night. Good evening. Thank you very much, Dr. Siti, Dr. Hisam, all students.